I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do I have a motion to accept tonight's agenda? All in favor? Aye. Aye. Okay. Great. I'll turn it over to Dr. Ratetic to introduce our guests tonight.
Good evening. So we're going to begin by honoring the ball athletes, and I'm going to turn it over to our athletic director, John Bonamano.
Thank you guys so much for having us here this evening. It's with great pride and honor that we honor our fall scholar athletes again this year. This is the fourth consecutive year that our fall scholar athletes have had a team GPA. 100% of our teams had a team GPA of 90 or above, which puts us in the running again for the School Distinction Award. Just so you have an understanding of what that means, we're one of only 9 schools in the entire section that have received this honor, and we've received it the past 3 years in a row. So 100% of our varsity athletic programs have had a 90 GPA or above. So we have some scholar athletes here this evening that I would just like to come up and represent their programs. I believe I have everyone here. If I don't, please, I'll announce you too. So from our cross country team, we have Noah Brenner, Luke Calabrese, Michael Karen, Declan Lyons, Kevin Lyons, and Simon Silverman. You guys can stand up. And their illustrious coach, Chris Barry. Some of our athletes weren't able to make it this evening. Our varsity field hockey captains were Natalie Rushford and Daisy Hodges. So we're very happy, for their contributions as well. From the varsity football team, we had Danny Nairati and Eldad Frechter. Our varsity boys soccer team had Alex Chevron, Joseph Rosario, Griffin Warner, and Cormac Lyons, who were all captains and leaders of that program. This evening here we have from the girls varsity soccer program, Sophia Im, Maddie Okun, and Frederica Ricardella. You guys stand up. And then from our varsity swim captain was Lena Estes. From our varsity tennis team, headed up by Coach Gina Marr. There in the back, we have Kayla Clinton, Laura Neubauer, Sarah Welter, Julia Welter, and Ryan Cherry. And Coach Lentini is here for another presentation this evening. So thank you for working with our girls with the swim team. And finally, our varsity volleyball team, Yelena Herseg, Nia Kilberry, and Kylie Kent were the captains. With all of your leadership, coaches down through the players, you guys set an example of what it means to be an Irvington athlete and a scholar athlete at that, and we're very proud of you. So I would love an opportunity for our athletes to come up and take a picture with the board. We do have the trophy that was presented to us, or to me, during our early meeting with the section this year for school distinction for this year, as well as the state championship runner-up trophy plaque from the state championships for the boys cross country this year. It was only the second time in the school's history that they were able to podium in that event, and they did an amazing job. So I'd love for all our athletes to come up. If the board would mind stepping in front, we could take a picture together.
No.
Or, remember, you can stay in the front. Sorry for the delay. And you're coming tomorrow too, right? Yeah. That's right.
Can we get at that in the budget?
So Board of Education, just want to thank you again for all your support for our athletic programs, and looking forward to another great winter.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John, for all your hard work, and congratulations to all the scholar athletes this evening. Moving on, we're going to hear from Sabrina and Jonah regarding our student BOE report.
Good evening. We'd like to start. Oh,
Okay, we can wait for them.
good evening. We'd like to start out by saying that this school year is continuing to go well. Everyone had a great Thanksgiving break. Having this time off gave students time to relax and recollect while spending time with their families. A lot of students have very busy schedules involving sports, homework, jobs, volunteering, and whatever other extracurriculars. It's very easy for students to feel burnt out and overwhelmed, whether it's inside or outside of school. We have to remember that it's important to have a break every now and then. Whether it's Thanksgiving break, the holiday break, a weekend, or even just lunchtime, students need time to reset their brains so they actually function, take in information, and be able to do their work.
Next, auditions for the spring musical are in progress at the moment. For those who don't know, the production is Mean Girls. The show dates are March 13th, 14th, and 15th. I know it's pretty early, but people need to know to keep their schedules clear for those dates so they don't miss out.
And as us seniors get excited for the musical, we're also very happy with our updated parking plan, allowing seniors interested the chance to park in the upper gravel lot on either A days or B days.
On another note, Student Council has begun their planning for Color Wars. If anybody doesn't know what this is, it's essentially field day, but indoors, and with the grades competing against each other. Right now, each grade is coming up with ideas for their theme. Each grade has a different color, which they correlate their theme to. For example, last year, seniors were senior soldiers, juniors were Jaws themed, surfing sophomores, and freshmen rubber ducks. If you couldn't tell, seniors are green, juniors red, sophomore blue, and freshmen are yellow. Planning this day is the main thing that Student Council does, and it does require quite a good amount of work in preparation. Even though this is true, I think that the Student Council does have more potential, and I would like us to hold more events for students. Lastly, students are getting prepared for winter, with many puffer jackets already spotted moving through the hallways. We're all looking forward to the holidays and maybe a snow day here and there.
Other than that, Jonah and I are looking forward to today's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll move on to some district updates. So we are in the month of December, which usually brings lots of events and concerts that we want to make sure the community is aware of. So this Wednesday at 7 p.m., we have our band concert. We hope the community will come out and join us. On the 11th of December, we have orchestra at 6:30 p.m. and chorus at 7:45. And on the 8th of December, we will have the Max Stossel virtual Q&A at 7 p.m. This is for parents who had the opportunity to hear a presentation from Max Stossel and we will log on to ask him any questions you have about social media use on the 8th at 7 p.m. Parent-teacher conferences at Dow's Lane and Main Street School will be on the 9th of December as well as the 11th of December. And progress reports for elementary school students will go live in the Infinite Campus portal on December 4th at 3:30 p.m. So those are some of the updates and fun activities we have planned throughout the month of December. And committee reports.
Do I have an update from Buildings and Grounds?
Sure. So B&G has continued to move forward with the work that was authorized last year. The good news is that we're receiving bids and moving forward with some of the work with the hope that we will have lights installed sometime in the spring. But that's, of course, very weather dependent. And other than that, we're just moving forward with figuring out the field and the track and getting those bids into that work can happen next summer.
Thank you. Communications?
We continue to talk about updates to the website, which will be launching sometime soon after the new year. And also discuss plans to get more parents using Parent Square, which will help streamline information. And it's much cleaner and more streamlined than our current communications. So looking forward to moving forward on that. And we also talked about the Max Stossel events that Dr. Atesic just referenced.
Curriculum?
Yes, lots of exciting things to report. The high school has developed a new partnership with the Rivertowns Dispatch. 2 9th graders and 1 11th grader was selected to work with Allison Schulte, publisher of the Dispatch. Students will have the opportunity to learn from professional journalists, skills such as pitching story ideas, developing credible sources, and drafting news articles. This partnership will provide authentic real-world learning experience that supports students' growth as writers and critical thinkers. A building thinking classrooms in service course will be offered for staff. This framework will work to explore approaches that increase student engagement, problem solving, and mathematical reasoning. The departmental data teams meeting will engage in shifting practices from looking at data to how to effectively use it to guide instruction. And we talked about the feedback from the surveys of the November 4th conference day, and it reflected strong and positive reviews. Staff appreciated the time and the collaborative work.
Policy?
The policy committee is working on a sizable number of outdated and redundant policies, and we're working through them to see what policies can be rescinded and what policies we need to keep with the goal of cleaning up our policy manual.
Does anyone have any updates from their liaison assignments? Okay, thank you. All right, now on to the main event.
So it's my pleasure tonight to introduce Mr. Hirsch, the principal of Irvington High School, with a group of teachers and students, as well as Sarah Russ, this assistant principal, who are going to speak to the IHS schedule change.
Thank you. Hopefully by now you've heard that there's going to be a schedule change at the high school, and thought that we'd begin. Oh, I know why, because Evan reminded me, turn it off to save battery, turn it back on to do that. So some of this, we've had so many sort of communications and meetings that I'm not sure how much of this is redundant and how much of this is, sharing news, but we thought it would make sense to start with the why. So why are we changing? And we're changing really for a number of reasons. I'll start at the sort of most macro level. What we know is happening in high schools nationally. Often it's written about as grind culture. Nationally, 1 in 4 teens report experiencing burnout. The rates of anxiety and depression amongst teenagers have increased sharply over the last 15 years. And when talking to the service providers here at the high school, and the counseling department and the nurse, those trends have been playing out here at Irvington High School over the last number of years, sort of in an increasingly rising rate.
We also, many of you are familiar with the survey that we administered in April of 2025 to all students through Challenge Success. And in that survey, a lot of really powerful data came out, much of which was very affirming for the work that we're doing at the high school. But some of the numbers that you see on the slide here were some of the numbers that really raised questions for us. And it really made us think a lot about how we structure our time, because it's really hard to maximize engagement and minimize stress in our current schedule. And we'll explore more deeply what that looks like. But we also wanted to say along with this, that the schedule change is one component of this. The Challenge Success work is going to be also continuing and ongoing. We have a committee comprised of students and board members and teachers, administrators who are working to think about, in addition to just restructuring our time, what are some other measures that we can take as a school to continue to improve engagement, reduce stress, and improve the experience overall. I'll say kind of as a teaser, one thing we're working on right now is bringing therapy dogs into the high school.
Yeah, and so just to highlight some of the numbers in front of you, Challenge Success, which again is affiliated with Stanford University, sort of differentiates different types of engagement. So one type of engagement is behavioral engagement, where we are off the charts. When our teachers ask students to do something, boy, they do it. They do it, incredibly faithfully. They get good grades and they earn those grades. But when asked to measure what the term meaningful engagement, do you find your work joyful? Do you find it meaningful? Do you find it relevant to your lives? The average among schools that participate in the Challenge Success Survey, and so it's already a select pool, and typically they're schools like us, high achieving schools. The national number was about 13%. And I am sad to say, but I'll say I'm motivated to say that when we administered the survey, 7% of our students were meaningfully engaged. And so that to us is, if not a crisis, it's certainly a reason to look at what are we doing and what could we be doing differently. And then along the same lines, 81% of our students reported having a stress reaction within the past month of taking the survey, whether that was headache, nausea, all the typical, the classic sort of stress symptoms. So if somebody asked me, in the shortest way possible, why change? We want to increase meaningful engagement for our students. We want them to feel healthier and to be healthier. And then I'll also add, our teachers are experiencing different versions of the same thing, that they are asked to deliver New York State mandates, state curriculum, district vision, district initiative, and they're supposed to do it in about 38 minutes of meaningful time each day, right? We have a 43-minute period, kids settle in, hi, how are you? Did you take out the homework? Great, let's get going. And you're left to, 38, 35 minutes to do all that. Beep, 3 minutes, move on, do it again, beep, move on, do it again, and so forth. And so our teachers and our students both feel that they've been on this hamster wheel, go, 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 go. And so while, again, high rates of achievement, it's starting to feel unsustainable, and it's not the kind of teaching and learning that we talk about when we speak about the portrait of the graduate. And to stress, it's no one's fault, right? It's not that our teachers decide, oh, we just want to do it this way, or that students are saying, we're fine, we don't want, we don't need to be engaged. It's just our structures have sort of forced us into this box. And so in the next slide, you're going to see some actual quotes from actual students. Ms. Rust and I have conducted study groups. We've listened to students in Principals Council. We've, through our Challenge Success team. And these are some things that students have said, which will, let you just read. Know that this is not everybody's experience every day, but that this is what our students have told us, which again, motivates us to want to change. And one of the things that it's all over that slide, but they've said to me, and it's stuck with me, is there's nothing wrong with direct instruction or a good lecture or a good whole class discussion. Like, that's really important. We like that. It just can't always be that, and that we really need variety. And so when we think about our uses of time, We want to create a schedule that will give teachers and students the opportunity to have different instructional moves and to deepen the learning and the engagement. Too often, if you ask, your students at home or the students in this room, our students have 4 more lecture periods in a row. And so when there have been students at the outset of this who said, boy, I don't know how I could sit in a lecture for 80 minutes, which, by the way, is not the goal. We are not going to be lecturing for 80 minutes. But if a student just sat through 4 lecture periods in a row, they've done it for 160 minutes. The cognitive task hasn't changed in those 160 minutes. Too often our students have no break or lunch. They'll have a lunch period without their core group of friends. We heard our ex officio member talk about the importance of having a break in the day, a meaningful break in the day. And too many of our students don't have that. Too often our students have had to skip clubs due to scheduling conflicts, have had more than 4 assessments in a day, homework that they're managing for 5 or more classes in a night, and not being able to find time to work with peers on a group project. So even as our teachers try to create innovative group project, collaborative opportunities, by the time our students get home and are done with sports or family obligations or a job, maybe eat dinner, okay, it's time to log in and do the homework. All right, I have 3 other group members, but they're all living the same lives. There's no time to meaningfully collaborate given our current structures.
So we wanted to really demonstrate to you how student time is currently structured. And so there are 3 sample schedules up. One is a 12th grade schedule, one a 9th grade, and one an 11th grade. And what I want you kind of to imagine is you put yourself like back in the seats of being high school students, is the sheer number of transitions that students are going through on a day-to-day basis. So if we look at the schedule all the way on the right, the junior schedule, it starts with AP American History. That student is transitioning from history to chemistry to music theory to Spanish to English to advanced publishing to pre-calc honors to AP Computer Science, with again just 3 minutes in between. And this schedule is one that represents the 10% of our students who elect to forego a lunch period. So again, just thinking about the number of mental transitions that students have to go through and teachers to reset between each period. And then also they are accountable for that full day's work every night when homework is assigned, and then the next day repeat again. So these are schedules that again represent kind of our current norm. For this one, we're going to ask for some board participation. But we just want you to take a look at this schedule. This is just a sample student schedule from UC Boulder. It probably will remind you of schedules that you had when you were in college. But want you to notice, or just to call out, what are you noticing from this schedule? How does it compare to what our high school students are currently experiencing? And how do you think our current schedule prepares kids for this?
I notice a lot of time in between classes, so.
Yeah.
And no more than 3 in any given day.
Mm-hmm.
Someone else speak.
Everyone else. Mm-hmm. Yep.
No one scheduled an 8 o'clock class.
You wake up early, you can schedule yourself for the late class. No, so you pointed out some of the highlights. So again, there's space, there's breathing room in between. There's a break in between where you could be eating lunch, you could be studying, you could be collaborating with people, you could be just taking a general break. And again, fewer transitions throughout your day.
And the other thing I'd point out is classes don't meet every day, but that doesn't mean that students aren't learning and learning deeply and meaningfully.
You may have seen in the New York Times, I think just within the last week, there was an op-ed published, and I'm going to read the title directly because it was so provocative. But the title or the headline of it was America's children are unwell. Are schools part of the problem? And this piece focused on the fact that numbers of students with depression and anxiety and stress and ADHD are skyrocketing nationwide. And what the op-ed questions is like, is this something inherent about our kids today, or is this something about the systems that we are like forcing our kids through? And it is not, if we think about again, high school experience and what it used to be, it's always been a stress. There's always been a measure of or degree of stress, right? But it seems like that stress is rising and rising and rising. And the op-ed also actually cited research from Stanford University's Challenge Success that we're partnering with, which is very affirming, but really thinks about, again, it's kind of the antithesis of what we want for our students. So we want, as opposed to kind of the stress wheel that we're on right now, we want not only less stress, but we also want more joy. Not to say that there's not joy in the building currently, there's a lot of it. But to have students be able to have more space and time to process what they're learning, to interact with their peers in non-academic settings as well as academic. Going back to the number that John focused on with the 7% of, the really meaningful engagement in terms of being like finding your work relevant and authentic. We want students to find more meaning in their work. We want them to go through class periods having more variety as opposed to kind of a similar structure 8 times a day. And then going back to that previous schedule, we want them to be better prepared for college and work, where unless you're a high school teacher in this current structure, most adults' lives don't look like the way that we're setting up high school right now.
Yeah, thanks. And these priorities weren't just ones that we came up with, even though we stand behind every single one. We spent the last year, you may remember from a previous presentation, we spent the last year in a structure and study committee that asked ourselves, what are the lives that are lived in the building? To what extent do our current structures support the lives we want to be living, and to what extent are they barriers to the kind of teaching, learning, and experience we want? And then the last thing I would add, for those of us of a certain age, we might remember, well, yes, there were days that were hard and that school wasn't stress-free, but it didn't always feel like this. And that if John Hirsch in 1991 was to present what his high school experience was like, I would not be talking about feeling, a stress-induced health symptom in the last month. Maybe I could have used a little more stress, to be honest. I would not have been talking about feeling like burnt out. It was hard. We worked, but there was joy, but it didn't feel like this.
That leads perfectly to what we don't want. So if you ask our students what their biggest fear is, it's that we lengthen the periods, but nothing else really changes, right? So it could be, okay, it's now 80 minutes. We don't want to just have 2 lessons stapled together and kind of creating this Frankenstein model of a lesson. So instead, we're really thinking, and we'll again dive more deeply throughout this presentation into our professional development plan for teachers and into some sample ways to structure the time with longer blocks. But what we want is students to be actively learning, not the passive sitting for longer periods of time.
Great. And so there are 2 alternative models that are widely in use in Westchester. And so those are the 2 models that we kind of focused on. I'm going to walk you through each model, and then you'll hear from members of our schedule committee who visited 6 different schools that are living these models, and they can talk about what they experienced on those site visits. I'm just going to warn you, the first one at first blush might look confusing, so stay with me. The first model is called either rotate and drop or the snake. The schools that we visited that run the snake are Valhalla, Rye, and Byram. One thing particularly interesting about the Valhalla visit is they just went through this process. And so there were both teachers, but also students who were able to speak about the differences before the change and after the change. I'm going to focus, as the way this schedule is set up, classes are about 60 minutes. You're going to hear me say about a bunch of times because there are certain things that we're still talking about, how long do we want passing time to change? How long exactly should lunch be? So roughly 60-minute classes. You'll notice that they rotate once in the morning and once in the afternoon. So does the laser reach that far? No. I lost the laser. All right. We don't need the laser. Stay with me. Let's focus on the first block, A day. This is a sample student. It's not everybody in school, a sample student. Block 1, A day. What does this student have? Social studies. That's great. That's great. So now on B day, the next day, that social studies class moves to block 2. On C day, it moves to block 3. On D day, it does not meet. It drops. On E day, back to first, F back to second, G back to third. It rotates. That's a feature, not a bug. The reason why the schools who run this schedule like this schedule is that both teachers and students get to see each other at different points of the day. If you ask teachers and students, what are the two worst periods to have class? Overwhelmingly, you're going to hear the first period of the day and the last period of the day. And so this gives an opportunity to sort of spread either spread the joy or spread the pain points, depending on where you stand. It also, for some students who have the hardest time is getting to school on time. They don't rack up all their absences in one quarter. I'm not looking at any student in particular. As if anybody's looking guilty, that's on you. I'm not looking at you. We're going to take a look at one more rotation just to make sure we have it. ELA on A day, block 2. On B day goes to block 3. It drops on C day. On D day goes to the first block. On E day back to second block. F day back to third block, and then drops on G day. You'll also notice that there is a rotation in the afternoon. The reason why we would do 2 rotations is because we have a significant number of students who choose to do Career Center at BOCES. For those students, we need to make sure there are core classes that operate for them in the morning and the afternoon, so that they could do Career Center in either session and still be able to have, accrue credits. The other thing you'll notice in the middle of this schedule, what does every person in this schedule have in the middle of the day? Lunch, a break, amazing. And it's a unit lunch. So everybody has lunch at the same time, which we will talk about the mechanics of that later in the presentation. But this is, again, this is like a big darn deal. For those of you who remember what it was like when your students first entered high school, or for students when you first entered high school, one of the major stresses is, oh my God, not everybody in my class has lunch at the same time. What if I have a lunch period with none of my friends? And even worse, what if all of my other friends have lunch one period and I'm the only one without that lunch period? And it's a major stressor. This takes that stress away. Everybody has lunch at the same time. There are no courses scheduled. It's also a chance for teachers to all have lunch at the same time during the day, which allows for collegiality. If people want to, meet informally, they can, but it's their time and everybody gets that sort of deep breath in the middle of the day. The unit lunch, again, we'll talk more about this, offers unique opportunities for either clubs or special programming within a unit lunch. Okay. Music, you'll notice in both of the permutations we're going to look at, occupy, just as it does now, will sort of stay just outside the normal bell schedule so that our students don't have to choose between band and an elective or course and an AP class, which is one of the reasons why so many of our students are able to participate in our amazing music program, Come to the Concert tomorrow night. The next model that we're looking at is a classic block, sometimes called a 4x4. These classes are roughly 80 minutes. The schools we visited that run the block are Bronxville, Hastings, and Westlake. They work on an A and B day schedule. So again, I want to be really clear. I think when I showed this to some students, there was maybe a fear that, wait, everybody's English at the same time. This is just one sample schedule. So on this student sample schedule on A day, they have 80 minutes of ELA, 80 minutes of math, a unit lunch, then science, and then either PE or lab. One thing I want to point out is this in the schedule, it could feature something called a skinny, which are classes that occupy half a block. Those would probably include our PE classes and we no longer have to call them labs because the periods are long enough to do a lab whenever it's actually appropriate in the curriculum. So I'll call it a science extension period, but those two could share one block and operate as a skinny. On B day, the next day, 4 academic periods, 4 different classes. Social studies followed by world language, lunch, followed by art, followed by an elective. This schedule, there are only 4 academic blocks a day. It manages workflow very differently for students than our current schedule does. I'm going to show you, there's also a feature called an X day, which I'll show you in a moment. But one of the things that I think you'll hear from people when they talk about their visits is much more gets done organically in class as classwork because there's time to do it. And so it's not that there is no homework in a 4x4, there is homework, but there's often less homework because more got done in class. And so the purpose of homework isn't about, guys, we got to find a way to get that group project done. We had time to do the group project in class. It's more sort of, reinforcement or extension activities. So one of the schools that we visited, Bronxville, also employs something called an X Day, which is something that I'm very interested in as well. I'll show you what that looks like. On the left is, the block that we sort of looked at already, with corresponding roughly with our current bell schedule. And then twice a week, they have something called X Day, where the class meeting periods go from 80 to about 70 minutes. That unit lunch is extended by about a half hour to allow for, again, clubs to meet. There could be open office hours there where students could drop in to teachers for extra help, as they currently do ninth period. It's an opportunity for special programming if we need to hold a class meeting. One of the schools we visited, I think, had a cornhole tournament going on during at special programming during one of the unit lunches. And the X Day would allow us to sort of accordion our schedule a little bit to allow for different things. Okay. You guys came here not just to look professional. I'm going to invite members of the scheduling committee to come up to talk about what they saw on their school visits. We also, by the way, have 2 board members who joined us on school visits. We have an ex officio school board member who joined us on visits. So I should say 3 board members who joined us on visits. So if at any point you guys want to echo, amplify, or add on, feel free, but you're also not obligated to. So I'm going to ask our folks to sort of join me at the podium. It doesn't matter the order we speak in, but if you can introduce yourselves. And the prompts I gave them to think about here is where they started when they joined the schedule committee, in terms of what their thinking was when they joined, what they saw and heard on the visits, and where their thinking is now.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Alex Langers. I'm one of the science teachers here at the high school. Jonah, hello. So I was the only science member on the committee. I want to make sure at least that we have that, because that was one of our concerns going into this process for the science department, because we're always battling the clock. We have a lot of curriculum to cover in a very short amount of time. And if we're losing time on this, that was causing stress. So I wanted to be a part of that. I was part of the team that went to Hastings and Rye. Right off the bat, my main takeaway was no one ever said we want to go back to what they had. There was never the sentiment at all in any of the models that we saw. The other thing I noticed is that with the unit lunch, I can't point out like a specific moment, but it felt calmer. The building felt better. Everyone had a place. It was not chaos. It just felt like the building took a breath at that moment. So right away, that became apparent that was a net positive with the whole unit lunch idea. When I started this, I thought the snake would be the model that I was going with. It made the most sense. It fit most closely with what the science department had already. Then as we saw more schools, I started leaning more towards the block, and now I'm more drawn. The block is great. Based on the different models we see, it can work with the science department. There is more room for disturbances, right? If you have a lot of class at one point in time, or you're missing a class or weather events or whatever, it can compound. The snake, the biggest issue is that it looks clunky. The schedule looks clunky. Everyone though says the same thing. You get used to it. It works. And obviously it works. So I am drawn on it at the moment, but I can see the benefits in both. But the one thing's for sure, no one wanted to go back, and the unit lunch was a net positive all around.
Hi everyone, I'm Alice Kamen and I'm a sophomore. So prior to seeing the block schedule for myself, I was probably one of its biggest haters. I can barely sit through a 45-minute period now, so I couldn't imagine how I was going to sit through an 80-minute one. However, when sitting through an 80-minute class at Hastings, it became clear that it wouldn't just be like one of our periods now doubled. So I sat through a history class, and the teacher started by introducing a group project, and she really had time to go over it. And then the students had like at least an hour to work on it. And so when we talked to the teacher, she explained that like with the block schedule, students do more collaborative work and group work, which for me like is a big plus because like it's hard to go from class to class and just sit and do work by yourself. And when talking to the students, they were freshmen, which I would have thought was like the hardest grade to like do a block because they probably have less of an attention span. But every single one of them loved it, and they said that they would never go back to their middle school schedule. They also said that they felt like they had less homework because they had 2 days to do it, and they had a better understanding of the material in the class. And overall, they felt like their days were shorter. Most of them said that they had an easy day and a hard day. So, like, on their hard days, they might have like math, science, and like English, but then on their easy days, they would have like art, gym. And so, even if they had to go through their hard day, they had their easy day the next day. So, they felt like that really helped them. And I think that the block schedule would really like relieve some of the stress and workload being put on students, especially upperclassmen. And I think that it would overall really benefit the school community.
Hi, I'm Kayla Mosca. I'm in 11th grade, and I also went to Hastings. And Mr. Hirsch mentioned the rates of depression, anxiety, and just how students feel that the content that they're learning is meaningful, or in our case, we don't really feel like it's meaningful. And I sat through a Spanish class, an 80-minute Spanish class, and a lot of students here are telling me, Kayla, you have to say no. I cannot sit through 80 minutes of Spanish. That's horrible. And I went in there and something just felt different. All of the students were engaged. All of the students wanted to read the book they were doing. They actually engaged in the conversations that the teachers posed. And they just seemed happier and enjoying what they were doing more. And coming back here, it really got me thinking, wow, we don't really engage. Like we're sitting there nodding our heads. I'm in my 0 period class, nobody talks. And in my 3rd period class, the teacher has to have cards call on us randomly because nobody will volunteer to answer the questions. And yes, all the classes I'm taking, I'm very interested in, but sometimes it just doesn't, it's so stressful sometimes. And upon like talking to some of my friends at Hastings, she mentioned how in middle school they had the schedule that we're on, the 9 periods, and now they're on the block schedule. And she said it was the best thing that ever happened to her school. She feels less stressed. She mentioned that she has less homework, which she said it might not even be less homework. It's just teaching her better time management because now she has, for example, 2 days to get her math homework done. Maybe she does 10 problems today, 10 problems tomorrow, getting the better time management, which is an extremely important skill for going into college and through life. And I think that personally, I am leaning towards block. Snake, I personally feel isn't much of a difference from what we have. Usually it's anywhere from 50 to 60 minutes, which when you think about it, if we do 50, that's only 7 minutes more than we have, or even 10, 15, 20. And a lot of people are scared of the 80 feeling so long, but I'm personally worried that if we do go with Snake, we won't see as big as a difference as we're hoping.
Good evening. First, I want to thank Mr. Hirsch for giving us this opportunity to present in front of the board, but also to learn more about the scheduling and the different opportunities that are here at IHS. It certainly helped and shaped a bunch of our perspectives on how we view school and how we view scheduling in general. My name is Abigail Choi. I'm an 11th grader here at IHS, and I'm part of the 10% that does not have a lunch period. I did not have one last year, and I consider myself not to have one this year either because all the periods I have, I devote to going to the library and studying and doing all my homework because there's simply no time after school to do it, on top of extracurriculars, on top of preparing for the orchestra performance, which you should go see next week. And when we visited Hastings, there was so much of a lighter feel to it. Everyone felt
very calm and it felt very transitional. There was more joy that were in the building, and the joy was contagious, as on the bus ride home, a bunch of the students that went on the school trip were very excited for the block schedule. Personally, I was completely against the block schedule. I could not sit through an 80 minutes. I didn't think I could sit through an 80-minute science period or an 80-minute lecture. But after hearing this plans for transforming the way that teachers teach and the way that we outline our curriculum, it seems so much more accomplishable and so much easier for us to transition throughout it. And I also talked to a lot of my friends who do have block schedule, and it does seem that they have an hour or two less of homework, which is a huge difference when you're staying up to midnight or 1 a.m. doing your homework and then waking up at 6 to go to school the next day or that morning. And I feel like with the block schedule, it feels lighter, it feels more easier, it feels easier to do, and it just feels like something that our school needs to transition to.
Okay. Hello, my name is Brooke and I'm in 10th grade. So I went on the Hastings visit, which was my first one. And like everyone else said, like at first I was completely against like any schedule change. I thought it was fine how it was. But we sat in on an English class and it was like not how I would have imagined it. And like when I came back, like everything changed. I thought that it was amazing. Everyone was really happy. And no one there had to be forced to lie and be like, oh, the schedule is good. They genuinely were speaking from like their experience with like sports and extracurriculars and clubs and stuff like that. And so what I saw was that there was a really good mixture of like everyone was being really interactive and everyone was included in class discussions, and there's a good mixture of the teacher teaching in the front and then discussions and then going back. And I went to Barham too, and I thought it was really good too. We didn't sit through a full period when we were there, but I felt like it was a lot like what we have now. It seemed like a lot of lecturing for the whole time and maybe like 10 to 15 minutes at the end of class to do break off work. And there was still homework assigned, which obviously there's still gonna be homework, but in like the time management sense or just like having less, I feel like it would be better to be able to get more done in school or to have maybe 2 days to finish it. And then I was also thinking like one thing that brought up which really helped me was that in school right now, even though it's only 40 minutes, which is like, oh, I only have to focus on this subject for 40 minutes, you have to completely switch your brain to go from like science to math to ELA. But with the longer periods, you're able to really put in your full effort and engagement and like completely like invest yourself in that subject and learn from that. And I feel like that would be really beneficial to get like the most out of it. And yeah, that's what I thought.
So I don't know if you heard this before, but I did not like the block schedule. But again, my mind was changed as soon as I saw the first one. First of all, that usually when I see throughout class is that my brain, I have to have like the first like 5 minutes of each class, like still thinking about the previous one, about the homework I did, about the different stuff. But with the 7 minute between time, I was able to refocus my time, get all that out of my brain, and think about the only thing that I need to think about, which was my next class. Another thing I was thinking about was the how the snake schedule, from the things I saw, felt it was different, but it also felt samey to what we have now. It was a lot, and what I feel like we need is a more drastic change, because I feel like it's only going to be a Band-Aid fix if we switch to such a similar schedule with such a similar time. Yeah, and a lot of kids I saw also were in a big support of the block schedule because of the yeah.
Thanks, Henry.
Yeah.
Bonsoir. My name is Devin Story. I'm a French teacher here at the high school. I saw Valhalla's Snake Drop, and then I saw Bronxville's 80-minute block. Dr. Ratezik, everybody wanted to say hi. I don't know who, but they all love you and miss you. So prior to, I also wanted to say that both options for the schedule change offer students the same number of classes. It's not like one would result in a student being able to take more classes than the other. So I, prior to joining this committee, was very anxious about the idea of an 80-minute block. But since seeing what happened at Bronxville or what's going on at Bronxville, I am fully in support of an 80-minute block. I think it would be a very easy transition from a world language perspective. And I am starting to see in my current lessons and the way we're teaching in our current system, how often I'm not finishing my lessons, I'll admit, or how often there are awkward transitions from one subject to another simply because of the timing. An example of that Sabrina can attest to, since she's in my 0-period AP French class, is with teaching into the essay writing in AP French, something that happens on the test in May. It takes me in our current system a minimum of 4 class periods to get through, from teaching how to write the essay to showing sample essays and student samples to showing my students their sources to actually writing their essay. It can get really dicey with the way that our periods are broken up right now. And it would be a much more seamless set of lessons if it were in an 80-minute block. So for their essay that they wrote not too long ago, I gave them the sources for their essay on a Friday, because that's just what had to happen with our weekly schedule. And then I had to snatch the sources out of their hands so they didn't go home over the weekend and write it and then come back with it written on Monday. And then on Monday, they came in and just wrote it immediately. But it would have been a lot more seamless if in an 80-minute period, they could have seen the sources and then immediately written that essay. That's just an example of how it would be easier for world language. And then I also wanted to just reiterate that, you know, what Mr. Langers had said, that in both schedules, everybody was 99% of students and staff were very happy with what they had, and they did not want to go back. With both schedules, there was just what I think students these days would call a vibe, like a good vibe. Students were relaxed and at ease, and they were happy with what they had. And then Bronxville also had a unique feature with the very beginning of their day, which we didn't see, but they, at the very beginning of their day, offer like a 30, 45 minute something period in the beginning of the day that's not like a class period, but it's kind of like an extra help option that students felt was a very relaxing beginning to their day and could be something that would help students make up work should they miss a day. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Diana Cassidy, and I'm one of our high school math and computer science teachers. I'm going to sound a little different than everyone else. So years ago, my first year of teaching, I actually taught an 80-minute block. And when I came here, it was hard to transition to teaching a 42-minute period, but I did, and I've been doing it for a long time. I was on the committee last time when we explored schedule options. I was happy to serve on the scheduling committee again this time. Both times until recently, I had no strong opinion. I was like, whatever, I'll make it work. But recently my opinion did change. So when I went on the visit to Valhalla, that's the only one I did because I said, I've taught in an 80-minute block. I don't need to see an 80-minute block. I know what it's like. But I went to visit Valhalla, which runs on the snake drop schedule. I had never seen it in action, so I wanted to have like that informed understanding of how it runs. So as Mr. Hirsch said, they had only switched to this schedule a couple of years ago. And there were 2 things that struck me. The first was how happy everyone was with the switch, like both teachers and the students. One of the questions that I asked is, if you could go back and do this again differently, would you do anything differently? Like, would you change, improve anything? They were like, no, it was great. So like, that was one thing that struck me. And something that the teachers also said was how they were able to transition the teaching easily because they looked at like their entire curriculum and they're like, well, if I put these things together, it fits. And if I put these things together, it fits. So they were able to like still fit in their curriculum. So why is this important to me? So for those of you who don't know, I teach our AP Calculus BC course, and it is a very content-heavy course. It's a course that worries a lot about the breadth of content rather than the depth. We have a lot of content to get through in a given year, and I am only just able to finish the content before the AP exam. something that I've been working on over the past few years. And I finally like got it down. Like we get everything in. The first year I was teaching a unit in like 2 days because it was a lot to figure out the pacing. I've heard from other BC calculus teachers and the sentiment that it is very challenging to teach that content with longer blocks. Some high school classes benefit from that extended time. Like I get that, to go into depth with content. But when a course like my course needs to explore many topics within the year and cover a great deal of content because of what is being tested at the end by a standardized assessment, the 50 or 60-minute blocks do a much better job at meeting the needs of those classes. It allows the benefit of the longer blocks, such as having the time to explore and do activities, and also the benefit of not having the class every other day, while it also allows the content-heavy courses to meet their needs. So it's a little different than things that other people have said, but I think it's an important light. I am also slightly concerned with, like, by the time we know which schedule we're going into, and really, I know that there is a plan for PD, but really having the time to be able to implement good lessons next year is a concern. So thank you.
By the way, Dr. Tetzko, we went back to Valhalla. People were happy to see me too. I don't want you to. Go ahead.
Maybe I shouldn't have gone after you, Diana. Sorry. So I, like Diana, was here for the first iteration of schedule change and was sad to see it kind of go away because I felt like it was something even years ago that was very much needed. Now I'm looking at it from the kind of opposite perspective in a way, because I already teach a project-based class, 2 of them actually. So for me, the type of instruction that I would hope to provide students fits really well or perfectly well with the block schedule. I teach a class and I got to see it actually at Westlake, the AP seminar class, and how it's conducted. And what I noticed was the little time it took for students to really get to what they had to do. The teacher was able to, because of the longer block, explain instructions clearly, explain what the work was supposed to be for the day. And then the students were working together and had that opportunity, if they needed to leave the room, to go copy something, let's say, that wasn't available on our wonderfully reliable computers. They could go over and get that from the library and come back with very little time missed. Whereas in a 42-minute block, that's like half the period's over by the time you get back sometimes. I also noticed that the teacher was able to conference with students several times. Students were able to approach the teacher. They were able to check in and make sure everyone was okay. There were moments during the sustained project that students were involved in where the teacher actually kind of broke it up and said, okay, where are we? Let's share out. Let's come up with some so that other people could kind of build off of the ideas that other groups were sharing. So for me, it really lends itself to a project-based class. In addition to that, as many of you know, I coach swimming, and I was lucky enough to also engage with the students from Hastings, who I coach, who really had no stake in the game whatsoever. They weren't chosen, by teachers or administrators because they like any particular schedule. And the students shared something really interesting, and these are club swimmers who have several interests outside of school. Their days are very, very long. And the one thing that stuck out to me the most was this idea that they can kind of decide, just like you would have to do in college, well, I have all these things on this day and very few on this day or less. So I can just kind of adapt and adjust the work according to my pacing. And the other thing they pointed out, one of them has a sibling who has special needs, and they mentioned that they're able to go and check in with teachers on that off day, which is really, really important too, to make sure they understand the content. I would imagine that would apply to anyone, that they're able to have that day to go check in and make sure they understand an assignment. I also just wanted to mention that I have been here for so long that I was original when this school existed in a unit lunch. Sorry, I think that's how long I've been here. Yeah. And I would have to say that culture was amazing, where students could come in, teachers were hanging out, having lunch together. Students would come in, talk about a book they read, talk about a movie they saw, and everything was really informal. And those are the kinds of relationships that this schedule has, I felt, diminished in my time here. So I really would love to see that unit lunch bring that back. Thanks.
Hi, Nancy Fitzpatrick, the secondary instructional coach. I was able to go on 3 of our visits. I went to Westlake, Hastings, and Valhalla. So I got to see 2 80-minute blocks and a snake. And I think the biggest takeaways I have from the 3 visits were that there was real increased engagement. There was a sense of community, deeper thinking, rich classroom discussions, all things that we look to embed into our lessons now. But as Devin pointed out earlier, Sometimes the class periods just get cut short and those things have to happen over the course of 2 days, or they wind up falling off of the lesson plan. Something else that I saw were targeted group instruction, scaffolding, individual check-ins, again, things that we look to embed, but we would be able to embed on a more regular basis with a different schedule. I also noted that there were some definite positive pieces of the community lunch. Students seemed much more relaxed. They seemed like they really had an opportunity to connect with students that they maybe wouldn't have had a chance to connect with otherwise. When we went to Valhalla, we were able to see them playing yard games because it was a spring, or not a spring, a fall, very nice fall day. So they were outside playing yard games during the community lunch. They talked about doing cookie decorating during the holidays and having guest speakers come in. So these are all things that we would be able to embed if we had that longer lunch period. So those were my takeaways.
It's times like these, I'm like, I can't do what the teachers do. I'm a counselor, so I'm talking one-on-one. So I'm Heather Attinello. I'm one of the high school counselors. So I visited 2 schools. I saw the snake style at Valhalla and the 80-minute block at Bronxville. And I was concerned about student engagement during the 80-minute block. That was one of my initial concerns, given that our current 42-minute structure can feel excessively long for some of our students. The snake schedule just looks plain old confusing to me. Like I was like, I don't even know how to read that, but that's just me. Early on, I questioned whether this model represented a substantial enough shift from our current high school schedule to warrant a transition effort. So during my visit to Valhalla, I went to an AP English class. The classroom discussion was overall teaching style appeared to be a little different from what we currently practice. But the class felt very familiar in structure and execution. The most appealing feature of the snake model is the staggering AM/PM sessions, as we saw earlier. The rotation is valuable for ensuring students are not always tackling the most demanding courses during the same part of the day. And my biggest question for that snake model is our Career Center students. The start and end times introduced by the rotation may pose logistical challenges for their transportation and attendance requirements at the offsite programs they're attending. The unit lunch at Valhalla was actually the cornhole tournament place. And what I was impressed with was the scattering of like food stations around the building. And just as Devin pointed out before, the vibe sort of unit lunch, everybody being, together and in unison. There's a nice outdoor seating area, a natural break in the middle of the day for students and staff. It felt really, really good. So that was the snake model. And then when I went to the 80-minute block at Bronxville, I sat in on another AP English class, and I was immediately struck by the positive tone and classroom community in the classroom. The atmosphere felt highly collaborative. The teacher, I said this sort of when we debriefed afterwards, it felt like the teacher was guiding the students more than lecturing, just like kind of guiding them through discussions. So I was really impressed by that. The extended 80-minute period we utilized for student collaboration, presentations, and active discussions. The entire classroom space was used for student activity. So contrary to my initial concerns, the 80-minute time frame did not feel very long at all. The class incorporated movement, and students were given opportunities to take short breaks as needed, preventing mental fatigue. There was a sense of community in that classroom, and this model appeared to facilitate deeper engagement and allowed teachers the necessary time to use varied student-centered instructional strategies, making the block structure feel purposeful and effective. And those are my impressions.
First of all, Joan, you want to go ahead?
I'm wondering if I could say some things. First, I just want to say that the change in schedule, it's not going to fix everything. There's still going to be stressors for students. I believe the workload and the homework should be kind of similar. It might be more manageable for students because it'll be over just different periods of times, but they are the same classes, so they will have pretty similar work, I'm guessing. But next, the block schedule did seem to have different and maybe more positives to it. Firstly, it's just more like college. It requires more executive functioning and different sort of planning than our schedule or the snake schedule has, because it's just different. They're bigger blocks, which you do see in college. And also the testing for the AP exams, we have lots of APs that the majority of students do take at least one AP. And those tests are very long. And some of these essays, like let's say, I forget, but last year for AP World, there was this one essay which is more than an hour long, and we just don't have that much amount of time within 42 minutes. So that would definitely help with just learning how to take these tests, because for this class that we took last year, we had to have an in-school field trip day, which did lead to us missing part of a different class. Also, the unit lunch is definitely good. Everybody needs a lunch just to have their brain relax at least. Students need that time in order to process their information and just have a break so that they're not as stressed out. And also the friend thing, lots of students don't have all their friends in the period, so that makes people feel left out or just sad that they don't have the right lunch. My lunch is like at 10 a.m. I don't love that. But for the snake schedule, I do like the switching of the time of the day for classes a lot. I do think that's very important. So for that reason, I do like the snake, but I also like the block. I don't know. I'm on the fence about them.
Thanks, John. Thanks, perfect. Before we go on, I just want to thank our incredible committee. By the way, there are many other members who aren't here presenting tonight, but I want to thank all of you for your thoughtfulness, your diligence, the seriousness with which you took the task. Being here tonight, presenting your voices, I think, are much more impactful than our voices. And so really appreciate your time, effort, and partnership. And that goes for the board members who are part of the committee and for Joan as well, who attended visits. Okay, moving ahead. The scheduling committee's task was not to stand before you and say, this is the way, this is what we must do. What the task was to analyze each schedule and present pros and cons. And if there was unanimity, we would certainly share that. There is not unanimity. But we'll go through each of the pros and cons as we saw it, and then I'll share the stakeholder, the consensus is not unanimous.
So these next two slides, we're going to try to synthesize what you heard from the committee members in terms of the pros and cons of each of the models. And I'll also say, since I went on several visits as well, that I just want to echo what was said about the state schedule, that like it feels, I think in ways that both feel comforting and also kind of like disappointing. It feels a lot like our schedule right now. But some of the pros that were pointed out about it, so seeing students at different points of day, so again, not always having like algebra 0 period, was seen as a benefit, and students at the schools that we visited with the state schedule spoke to that. There is a benefit to both schedules, both the snake and the block schedule, of doing fewer things at once. So even with the snake, again, the students would have fewer classes per day. It feels, change can be scary, and the snake schedule feels potentially a little bit more manageable in terms of not making as big of a shift. Once you get used to the schedule, it's visually confusing. It creates for greater consistency potentially throughout the day. And then the unit lunch is the through line. That's the thing that's very positive for both schedules. So these are the things, and again, the schools that we visited that have the snake schedule, we're very happy with it. Concerns that we had, again, are that, and I'll say when I was at one school in one class in particular, it was like, oh, this feels like a 52-minute version of a class here. It really didn't feel that different. Just more time to kind of do very similar types of activities. I think Alex mentioned that, the again, visual nature of that schedule, that yes, of course, every student and teacher we talked to at schools with the state schedule, they were like, oh, you eventually figure it out. But just even them trying to explain it was very laborious. So it is a more confusing schedule in that way. And then there are some concerns. We have a number of shared staff members, that this schedule is a little more difficult to work with the middle school schedule.
Yeah, and so when we talk about like resource management in terms of the shared staff stuff, it's about flexibility. And that this schedule allows a little bit less flexibility to be in sync with the middle school. And then the block schedule.
So the block schedule, pros, again, it just summarized some of what you heard from the committee members. It just more time to do more of the things that we want to do, more time to really develop the attributes of the portrait of your graduate that we want to see in students. More time to dive more deeply into the content within one period without, again, having to have the students go through those frequent every 42-minute transitions. And that just like we said with the last slide, that, smaller change maybe feels more manageable in terms of not taking such a big risk. It also means we're not getting such big benefits. So the 80-minute periods seem like a much bigger bang for the buck in terms of, like, we really want to make the change because we really value using time differently. So let's really use it differently. This schedule also, as John explained, when he walked you through a sample schedule, allows for the skinny period, so allows for more flexibility in scheduling. And then, of course, again, has the unit lunch that is very positive. We know that some departments, and I think you heard that from Diana, for example, some departments have more concerns with the schedule than others. And then the idea about disruptions, so things like if students or teachers are sick or if there's snow days, that it's a bigger disruption to miss that 80-minute block. Having said that, we did ask a lot of students and staff members at the schools that we visited about that. And they said, they're like, yeah, it's a big deal to miss it, but there's time the next day to make it up, right? So it's kind of built into the schedule, the opportunity to go see teachers, but potentially bigger disruption. And then, of course, we'd be remiss if we didn't say that, again, a bigger change, we're taking a risk. But we have a tremendous amount of confidence in our teachers and our students that this is going to be a positive change.
Thanks. And one other thing that like unit lunch is in all the schedules we looked at is currently our students, 90% of our students, right, not excluding the students who forego lunch, 90% of our students have 8 periods in which to schedule classes. That will be the same in either snake or block, that there will be 8 scheduling opportunities, not including music at the end of the day. So having presented to the faculty on a few occasions, to 3 different parent groups, to different class meetings, wanted to share the stakeholder feedback. It was in each group, it was more people were positive about the 4x4 block than the snake. The students' feedback was about 8-1. If I exclude the not sure or either way options, it was about 8-1 in favor of the 4x4. Faculty was about 3-1 in favor of 4x4. Parents, we didn't collect data in the same way, but based on the feedback that I received, that the scheduling email received and that district office received, I think it's fair to say that more people are in favor of 4x4 than the snake. Generalizing, I think there is some across the different stakeholder groups, there is excitement about the idea of doing fewer things at once and knowing that if we do fewer things at once, we do them better. As my wife likes to remind me, there's no such thing as multitasking. You're just doing several things at the same time poorly. There's also some excitement about the idea of depth over breadth and the opportunities that that affords us, and that there's shared time, that people will have time to be together. There is some wondering, how will unit lunch, excuse me, actually work? It's coming. I have some information, even some pictures. We'll talk more about that. What will this mean for electives? Again, we're going to still have 8 periods of scheduling. We will still have a robust course catalog of electives. There are electives are often changing. We're going to have some retirements this year. And so some of those electives are so tied to individual people that those electives tend to go away anyway. There are some electives we schedule dynamically based on student preference. There are some electives that students are showing less preference for. So those it makes sense to retire, but we are confident that we will be able to continue a robust choice of electives. And there's some wondering about the PD plan. Again, more on that shortly. And then there are outright concerns, the concerns of some of what does it mean to not see students every day? Or not to have a class every day. For some, that's a concern. There's a concern that we want to make sure we keep what's best about Irvington. And actually, I'll pause on that to say, you heard many people say glowing things about the teaching and learning at places like Hastings and Bronxville and Valhalla, and that is all true. But I want to say I would not trade our faculty for theirs, and I certainly would not trade our students for theirs. You've often, if you have come to graduation, you've heard me proudly proclaim that we are the jewel of the river towns. I firmly believe that. And so when you're looking at what is able to happen in some of these other schools that isn't able to happen here, it's not about capacity, it's about handcuffs. And so I look forward to a schedule that sort of takes some of those handcuffs off and allows us to do the things that we all want to be doing, and that will breathe new life into the portrait of the graduate. And then there is some concern about shared staff. How do you be in two buildings with two different schedules? And there are some concerns, particularly from the principal, about supervision. Having students, we will have a plan, we will talk about it. There are other schools do it, but it's a concern about supervising a unit lunch. It's different.
So we wanted to dive more deeply into the anticipated impacts on both students and staff. I know that, one thing I think one of our students and one of our teachers mentioned is this idea that with either schedule, the kids and teachers at the other schools all talked about, you sometimes have an easy day and a hard day. And the easy days make it easier to get through the hard days. And then you get through the hard day knowing that the next day, as a teacher, I'm going to have an extended block of time to grade an entire section of tests or to collaborate with a colleague, with a department member, with an ICT teacher. And as a student that like, oh my gosh, today's my day. I have like a lot of my core contents, but then tomorrow I'm going to get a chance to breathe. So you just have that nice balance with either one. I also just wanted to mention that this was on my mind, especially this week. This week alone, so today was a club schedule, tomorrow's a third schedule, and Thursday is an assembly schedule. And for the concert, and these are all wonderful things, and we're happy to have clubs, and we're happy to have in-school assemblies. We're happy to have third, and also they're disruptive to our schedule because they take a 42 or an already short period and they shorten it even further. And seeing teachers try to cram their lessons into 36 minutes or whatever is it's incredibly challenging, and these kind of special schedules start to feel less special as the year goes on, and it starts to almost feel like a norm. And when you get on a regular bell schedule, it's like, oh my gosh, thank goodness. We would be able to absorb all of those different activities into the new schedules that we're proposing. So that clubs, again, would meet during unit lunch. We could have the assembly. We could have for example, the concert preview during a unit lunch period. So we could get rid of a lot of these alternate schedules and really focus on the teaching and learning during the academic classes. Mentioned before, things like students, again, being able to better manage their time, having fewer transitions. I also wanted to say we had last year several staff members visited, or they shadowed students to really put themselves back in the shoes of a high school student. And something that all the staff members said is kind of like, it's just exhausting to go through a day with a student and to just, again, have your brain make all of those transitions over and over again. The guaranteed lunch, everyone has spoken about. With the longer periods, we'll have more opportunities for students to do authentic assessments and performance-based assessments. And then more opportunities for conferring, for one-on-one with teachers. And then I already spoke to the club time. For teachers, again, it's one concern that teachers raise a lot of times is, again, I don't have time to plan with my colleagues. I don't have time to meet with my cooperating teacher before our ICT class, or I have not nearly as much time as I would like. And in the new schedule, that time would be built into the day.
Thanks. And just to clarify, when we talk about moving things like the assembly during the lunch period, that'd be during the X period,
Yes,
the extended lunch, not the lunch period is sacrosanct. And so as you guys look at this slide, or as you folks look at this slide, and here's what we anticipate the impacts on, which are the impacts that you're most looking forward to? Go ahead. manage workflow. Okay, great, thanks. Go ahead. I thought you were, I'm sorry, Sue, I thought you were going to say. And so it's time for, I mean, I'll talk about our recommendations. My recommendation as principal. I started off sort of on the snake side also. I was the principal at Valhalla when we went through the process there. And for that building, naturally arrived at the snake. It made a lot of sense for that building and culture. And I'm happy to see that it's successful. The reason why I think I was starting in the snake spot was, again, what Sarah spoke to, it is a more manageable change. And yet, like many people you heard here, the more I sort of saw what it looked like in the other buildings, having spent a year really focusing intently on what it's like to live in Irvington and what is unique about it, I found myself more and more interested in the longer periods, the bigger change yielding bigger impact. And the way I sort of think about this shift to 80 minutes in a 4x4 schedule, it helps me to picture the students who fill our classrooms. Irvington is home to students with many different strengths and needs. The move to longer periods is about giving each of them, all of our students, time, clarity, and breathing room that support deeper learning. And so imagine a few students who may not be with us tonight, but are in our classrooms. We can start with a student like a Leonardo, who is endlessly curious, always sketching ideas in the margin of a notebook, constantly moving between concepts in science, art, and engineering. His thinking takes shape through trial and error. A short 42-minute class interrupts him just as he begins to understand a complex idea or begins to build something meaningful. With an 80-minute period, he can ask a question, design something new, gather feedback, revise it, all within one class period. The longer period matches the natural arc of his creativity, where deep focus leads to breakthrough. Students like Leonardo thrive when their school day gives them time to immerse themselves in real work, rather than jumping from surface level task to surface level task. Now imagine a student, let's call her Temple. She's a highly visual and analytical thinker who understands the world through patterns and systems. Transitions can be stressful for her. And when the pace is rushed and she loses the time she needs to process information and organize her thoughts, longer periods provide structure she relies on. She has time to settle into the lesson, see the connections between ideas, and work with tools or models without feeling hurried. Teachers have time to check in with her and offer support before moving on. The 4x4 schedule creates predictability and reduces the sensory strain of constant movement. Students like Temple succeed when their environment is calm, steady, and built around depth rather than speed. Next, picture a student like Greta. She's imaginative, energetic, driven by ideas that come quickly and sometimes all at once. She often has bursts of intense focus, followed by moments when her attention shifts. In a traditional schedule, she is juggling too many classes at once, and the constant changes disrupt her ability to stay engaged. Longer periods give her time to find her rhythm. She can brainstorm, write, collaborate, revise, and reflect, all in the same class. When her focus drifts, she has time to pause and reset without falling behind. With only 4 classes to manage in a day, her workload becomes manageable, and the quality of her academic work improves because she's working with depth rather than trying to hold so many different demands in her mind at once. And finally, let's consider a student like the many jack of all trades that are in our building. Let's consider Jack. This is a student who plays a sport, works a shift after school, helps care for siblings, and serves as a leader in clubs. Jack does well in his classes, but they are stretched. Each day is a puzzle of commitment, responsibility, and deadlines. In the 4x4 schedule, the student focuses on fewer subjects at once, which means fewer assignments to manage and less switching between competing priorities. More of the meaningful learning happens during class, so there's less work left for late evenings after practice or family obligation. Longer periods help this student plan ahead, complete larger chunks of work during the school day, and maintain a healthy balance between academic activities and home life. Students like this succeed when school supports their whole lives and not just the part of the day when they're in the building. I firmly believe that deeper learning through more time benefits every single person in this building, teacher, student, faculty, all of us. And the more I spent time thinking about it, the more passionate I am about it.
All right, so we wanted to look at what an 80-minute block could look like. So this is just one potential model. There are numerous models, and Nancy, one of our fabulous instructional coaches, has been doing a lot of work with the teachers already around kind of envisioning what these longer periods could look like. But one potential model is, and John said this earlier, but it's not direct we're not saying like no direct instruction. Direct instruction is incredibly important. But instead of it filling the entire length of the period, it has its place. So in this potential model, for about 30 minutes, the students are being directly instructed by the teacher, but that will look very different day to day and from course to course and from teacher to teacher. What we saw in some of the schools that we visited are when teachers did chunks of time like this for direct instruction, they had a lot of time built in to have the students turn and talk, to have the students do a practice problem, to model something on the board that the students could then try on their own, all within that direct instruction. So again, I don't want you thinking about it as 30 minutes necessarily of just lecture, but embedded with these other opportunities that teachers will now have more time for. And then the 40-minute application is not, there could be a model like Devin mentioned where it's like, okay, now you go and you take the stuff and you go write the essay. But it also, that might be when you have a very like targeted work products that you want. But in a lot of other cases, it's not going to be, okay, go 40 minutes, you have 40 minutes to complete this task. This is opportunity for teachers to reteach content to groups of students who maybe need more direct instruction or more examples. Opportunities for teachers to directly confer with students on a regular basis. And research around feedback shows that the most effective form of feedback for students comes through conferring as opposed to the comments that are written on essays or projects. For them to do things like debate, like Socratic seminar, that right now our teachers do. It's just, again, they take up, if you have a Socratic seminar, it's like get in the chairs, get started, do the thing, and then like we're out the door. So it now folds into the whole, network of the class. And then if you ask any teacher, what is the thing that almost always gives on any given day, it often is that reflection period at the end because you just run out of time. And the reflection is essential for students to synthesize, for them to kind of put like a bow on their work and say, again, before I move from AP chemistry to US history, like what is the thing from AP chemistry that I want to remember, that I want to really like lock in before I make that transition in the next class. And so the reflection opportunities will be much more abundant in these longer periods and far less likely to be sacrificed at the end because of time constraints. Okay. So for the professional development, I'm going to speak at the building level and then Scott is going to speak about it from the district perspective. But at the building level, we've already been starting to lay the groundwork about just teaching in longer periods. Like I said, Nancy's been doing a lot of work with faculty already, and Stephanie, our technology coach. Once we now know, okay, here's the model that we're definitely going with, we're going to be able to dive in even more deeply and even more intensely. And we are dedicating our time to this. This is the priority. Again, because like John said, because we believe so strongly that this is going to benefit every member of our community. So we're talking about things like our faculty meetings, our department meetings. On PLUR days, I know a lot of times community members are like, what do you do on PLUR? So once a month, we have been running ed camps, which is a model where teachers can say like, well, this is the thing that I want to talk about. Now we're making it all of that schedule change, but like I really want to think about building relationships with kids when I'm not seeing them every day, or I really want to think about math specifically and what that's going to look like in 80-minute chunks. And teachers get together and have an opportunity to collaborate. We are going to be able to provide release time for teachers. We actually have an interesting opportunity toward the end of the year where our seniors leave after I think it's the 15th this year to go on their internships. It frees up some of our staff. We can provide release time for teachers to do planning work while in school. There's going to be funds dedicated for teachers who want to do summer work. And then again, we are lucky as a district to be able to have 2 instructional coaches who will partner with teachers. And Scott, speaking from your perspective.
Sure. So I definitely want to start by thanking John and Sarah and the entire high school faculty for being such great partners as we begin to think about what the needs are in terms of professional development. And I think all of these different ways in which we can provide professional development are really going to come in handy as we move into the winter and the spring. I think, we've approached this from two different perspectives. One from the pedagogical perspective, that kind of general PD around pedagogy. What is it that we're going to need in order to really understand and be able to teach within the block and to provide those experiences that all of our students tonight and as we've gone through this process have talked about as providing that engaging level of experience within the classroom. We've also been able to work very collaboratively with the department chairs because outside of general PD, we need to recognize that each department has its own special kinds of needs in terms of instruction that we're going to have to kind of tackle and be able to help teachers with. So the department chairs have spent a lot of time identifying those specific needs. We're working collaboratively with both Southern and Northern Westchester BOCES to be able to provide if there's support that needs to be brought in, whether it be through consultants or thought partners, people that have done this work before. And I think one of the things that we've heard very loudly from teachers is the need to talk with and get support from people who are living this. Currently. So we've got a lot of partners in the region who are using the block schedule, and I've already been reaching out to those partner districts to set up time for districts to have conversations during some of these different experiences and on Professional Development Day that we have coming up in the spring to be able to ask those questions, have those deep conversations, and learn from those who have already made the transition. So we are looking forward to a busy but fruitful spring, and then being able to provide the time over the summer for teachers to be able to really dive into that work. And I think the last thing is that this is not a one and done experience. PD has to be ongoing. So, as we prepare for September, that's one piece of it. But then we need to think about how do we support teachers as they get into the model and be able to realize this works, this doesn't work. This is something that I want to learn more about. This is a great experience, and be able to continue that professional development as we continue on throughout next year.
I was going to say, by the way, we're already at 9 o'clock. So if anybody needs to go, happy to have you stay and be part of Q&A. But if you have to go, thank you so much for your time. You're already in overtime. So thank you.
Thank you.
No, don't be sorry. Thanks. Thank you. Thanks, guys. Thank you. So one of the other considerations that I know people are curious about is what will the impact of this schedule be on special ed or ENL and other student supports. First of all, in an 80-minute block, again, with the X days, resource rooms would have the opportunity to be scheduled as skinnies or as doubles, depending on student need. IEPs will be written to reflect the schedule change. Again, it's the benefit of having really good neighbors. We know that the schools that run the Westlake, Bronxville, and the other schools that run a block satisfy IEP mandates and have robust special ed programs. And so we're partnering with our neighboring districts to sort of learn best practices. Pullouts that happen right now that take students out of periods could be now taken out of a portion of a period. We'll continue as we do now to avoid core academic classes when we have to pull out to deliver services, but this allows us, again, greater flexibility on how our support staff can meet with students. All IEP mandates will continue to be met. Another benefit is extra time also benefits students with extra time. So that right now, if it's a 40-minute test and you're a student who has time and a half, you start your test during your period. You then have to find a free period if you have one, or stay ninth period to get that the half part of time and a half in. And if you had 2 tests in one day, we're sort of trying to cobble things together over days. In an 80-minute period, assessments can be planned so that students, both with no accommodation and time and a half, can both be able to finish the assessment within one period. It's better for students and less stressful on the building systems. SDRI, OT, speech, ENL can operate as skinnies within the block, which again, allows us to meet mandates, and also doesn't necessarily take our students out of the elective program. There will be no change to programmatic goals. So programs like VIP will continue to operate where our students go out either to the Career Center or to vocational work. They will continue to do to get their mandate services, and will continue to be able to mainstream it, participate in our courses that now have more time for the support to happen, needed support to happen within a class period, rather than just hold on and we'll try and support it when we're back in a support period. And then the X block provides opportunities. Again, I could imagine the DBT instruction that's happening right now as a push into health classes. Maybe that happens during an X block. We've already spoken with our counseling department about counseling groups, and how for the first time, counselors might be able to meet with groups of students that are actually on their caseload, and not just, I was able to push into this class and 3 of the kids were. That flexibility allows for a more targeted and I think effective service providing model. So let's talk about some of the facilities plans. We already, thanks to our great partnership with the IFA, with the IFA, yes, and also the IEF, we will be piloting a new classroom setup this year that help facilitate innovative instruction. As you look at these mock-ups, notice the flexibility in the furniture, that what you see as big tables can also be broken apart into smaller groups or individual desks. And that how the student experience is centered even in the classroom design. Imagine the collaborative performance-based tasks that run much more smoothly and efficiently in more innovative classroom setups. Again, this change is not about the minutes. It's about what we can do within those minutes. The facilities team, led by Carol Stein, we've been talking about this change for over a year. And so let's talk about unit lunch. And we do have a plan. First of all, it's important to remember that this is a proven model in other districts. That this is not, it's new to us, but it is not a new model. Right now, Aramark is the company that runs our cafeteria program. They run unit lunches in other schools. They are familiar with that model. They're talking about adjusting their staffing to reduce wait times during a unit lunch. Know that neither middle school nor a downstairs BOCES program would be scheduled for lunch at the same time as our students to sort of relieve some of that pressure. The cafeteria seats 262 students. That's about 60% of the students who are actually here on a given day. We also are looking at new seating and serving areas. Here are some food service innovations that we're excited about. On the left, you may recognize that as one form of a satellite food service station. Recently introduced a quesadilla station at that satellite food service. We are talking about delivering food. Yes, we'll have the cafeteria, the traditional hot lunch, but other models to accommodate students who don't want to be in the crowds of the cafeteria. On the right, you'll notice a complete meal vending machine. That's not filled with Pop-Tarts or Capri Suns. It's filled with salads and sandwiches made fresh daily in a refrigerated vending machine. We're going to be piloting one of those in the Academic Commons this spring. Did I get that right, by the way? Okay. I listen, I do. And then you'll also notice in the middle, this is one example of an alternate seating area. That's the second floor of our science building, outfitted with tables and chairs to give students opportunities throughout campus. There are plenty of areas around this campus that could be used for students to be able to spread out and enjoy a relaxing unit lunch. So a year ago, our Culture and Structure Committee identified our core needs. We want a schedule that supports those needs and is not a barrier to meeting those needs. Again, just as a reminder, these are things we talked about. If I had to sort of say them in a nutshell, higher meaningful engagement and more sustainable, sort of better social emotional health within the building. I believe that either of these schedules will help meet these needs better than our current schedule. I personally firmly believe that the 4x4 80-minute block will meet them even better. Phew. Thank you.
That was longer than a meeting that long.
Thank you very much for that presentation, and thank you to the committee members, especially those of you who are still here. I know it's been a very long day and a long night. I'm sure there are a number of questions from the trustees.
Thank you. I mean, I've had an opportunity to ask many questions and visit the schools. I wish everyone could have gone and seen the schools, because once you see what you're talking about, it becomes very clear that it's a really, really exciting opportunity. I think it's great. I really appreciated your mention of special education, and I loved the way that you described the different learners, because as a committee, we talked a little bit about separating neurodiverse learners. I really love the way that you talked about 4 different people. It included students, it didn't exclude people. So I really appreciated that. I think you should also mention that you met with Scaffold community, and you spoke to parents of special education students, and that there were special education teachers on the committee, and I witnessed them advocating for their students and asking a lot of questions, because I think one of the concerns that families who have children in special education have is that, you know, their children are not included, and that they weren't thought of in this process. And I was a witness to the fact that they very much were. Could you maybe just give more specific examples of how related services and resource room would work in a block schedule, given that annual review season is coming up pretty soon? And clearly all of these other schools make it work, and they're all in compliance, and we're in a learning phase. But come New Year,
Right.
talk.
That's right. And I would also add that in a previous life, I was a special ed teacher who taught both in traditional and in blocks, both 60s, 80s, and other permutations. So a resource room model in this, in an 80-minute 4x4, there's flexibility there. For the students who need resource room as sort of a to support executive functioning and to sort of help manage it all, they may be satisfied with a resource room that is a skinny, right? That is half a block. Those students would come in, set their agendas, you know, the way many resource room teachers do it is, let's look at work that's due short-term, medium-term, long-term. Let's have a plan for each. I would add that in this schedule, some of the pressure that those students face is eliminated. If you are a student or know a student who is constantly sort of juggling, and there's always one class in crisis, and then you fix that class, and oh my gosh, what happened to the other classes? A lot of that is made easier because there are just fewer demands at once, and the workflow is more manageable. For students who need more support and would be scheduled for a longer resource room period, a full block resource room period, in those settings, in addition to the sort of check-in, let's take a breath, how are things going? It allows for either reteaching or for true like skill building lessons, opportunities to sit down with a student and their assigned reading, and let's margin note and highlight together, ask ourselves the big questions. Now, what does that mean for the work? To be able to do that and still have time to do that with other students at once. So the model itself, because it is expandable, helps meet the myriad of needs. As far as some of the, whether it's the reading intervention or an OT intervention, I think many of and in fact, we have somebody delivers SDRI with us. I think many of those teachers would attest to 80 minutes it's like sipping from a fire hydrant. It may just be too much. The endurance for an 80-minute reading intervention.
Very long, less the students go across as well. It actually increases the opportunity to go through the entire lesson, where the previously didn't
Right.
go over through.
Right.
So
an opportunity to.
That SBRI, it allows you.
And for that, thank you. And for those who don't need as intensive, it's an opportunity to get what they need, still be able to participate in other courses or to take a break. And it's, again, it allows us to schedule based on student need. it also, from a scheduling and resource management standpoint, it allows teachers to be able to see more students or students in groups during a block of time rather than individual grab them where we can. And were there more? Do you want me to speak
No,
to?
no,
or-
no, that's great. And also just, we also, on the visits, we talked a lot about testing
Mhm.
and students are not, so a student is not, tests are not 80 minutes times
Correct.
2, right?
Correct.
I don't know if we mentioned
Yes,
that
correct.
in the,
I think it bears, I think I measured, but it certainly bears repeating.
right.
Yeah, no, I want to say that, that it's, when we talk to people at other schools and we think about what we want for our own students, it's absolutely not an 80-minute test and now the time and a half. It would be untenable for our students and for our staff in spaces. So instead, we're going to be thinking about within an 80-minute period, you have a 45-minute test. The student again gets to finish that test within the period itself. So they're not having to dip into a free period, they're not having to stay night, they're not having to miss their next academic class, which is actually what happens, I think, most frequently is that students, and it just backs them up throughout the entire day. And so that piece becomes a lot more manageable. And then we also started exploring with teachers in other schools, just what does it look like, you know, if I have extended time, Alex doesn't, Alex is done with the test after 45 minutes, I'm still going, what is Alex doing? And the teachers were like, oh, or like there's other, you know, we design other activities or other experiences that then the students who are testing during that time can get caught up on. But it's not competing with, they're not missing like novel content the way that they are right now.
Right. I think that's the most important thing that
Yeah.
people know is that the current model, although it's familiar, is actually quite challenging for students who are in special education, especially the testing part.
Yes, and one thing that we also didn't mention, if you sort of take the macro level, at the building level, because so many students with extended time are trying to utilize the test center at the same time, those alternate locations can be more crowded and busier and, you know, louder than actual classroom. And so allowing both students with no accommodation and time and a half to finish within their class period with their teacher there, it's better for them. It is also better for the students who need to use the alternate location.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I know how much work you've all put into this. So really appreciate this. I'm gonna touch on a couple of my questions. No, it's all good. I have one question. I feel really excited about the 4x4. I teach at 2 different universities, 2 and 3 hour blocks. And this just feels so much more like that. I think some of the teachers spoke about opportunities to connect more with the students, and like some of the best chunks of those longer times are the times where we're actually not doing the learning, and it's just like having time to chit chat and like really get to know my students. So I feel really excited about that. And I also think having that like more meaningful time with them makes it not matter that I don't see them more frequently. I was hearing the enthusiasm with the snake around like the shifting schedule, and I'm wondering, is there a scenario where that can exist, where like the shifting can exist in a block?
So one reason why it'd be very difficult to do that here would be the students at the Career Center. If they're, you know, if they needed a core, let's say socialized class, and it moved throughout the day, it would interfere with their ability to do Career Center. I mean, there are probably other reasons, but that to me is kind of the deal breaker on that.
Thank you again. I was also like dipping on some of the visits, so I know how much time and effort went into this. And just a couple of some of my comments and observations. I got the chance to sit through an almost an entire 80-minute block at Hastings, and I wasn't bored the entire time. I mean, it was just really refreshing to see the kids engaged and the different activities that happened throughout the course of that lesson, which I really think our students would also enjoy. Unit lunch, I've been a big proponent of that for a long time for all the reasons that people have talked about. It will be an adjustment, but at all the schools, none of the cafeterias can come close to holding the students. So, kids sit on the floor, kids find places with their friends to eat. I think it will just be an adjustment, but I think it's something that we'll be able to handle. Couple other comments, both the Hastings and Bronxville schedules have dedicated time for office hours, and I'd really like us to look at that in terms, not just within an X blocks, but having, whether it's the beginning of the day or the end of the day, every day, so kids know they can go find their teachers during those times to get help, because I think especially as we move to the new schedule, there's going to be less free time to sync up during the day. And I don't want to see us having to compete with clubs or the other things that are going on during lunch, which I think will be great student experiences. So I, encourage us to look at adding, that dedicated time in there. I think just from a board perspective, going forward, there's obviously going to be some costs associated with it, both in terms of increased PD costs to equip our teachers with all the skills they need to transition successfully, as well as what it's going to take for unit lunch and everything else. So I think, look forward to hearing from that, probably more from the central office over the coming time as we get into budget season, because, I know that will be a key part of it. And then I know this is a big lift and it's going to be a big change, but I'd be remiss if I didn't also make a plug for looking at start time. I think, both Hastings and Bronxville do start later. I have teenagers. I know what they're like in the morning. My daughter by work of schedule has no zero period every day and no first period. Yes, I know, because she's late to your class often, because so even with the extra time, she still can't get to school on time. But I do see how much better she is in just throughout the day in the morning this year versus last year with getting that extra sleep. So I know there's a lot of moving parts and it's a challenge, but I have to make a plug for that at least we look at it, because a big part of the move to the schedule is looking at the social emotional health of our kids. And I do think that is a big component of it in terms of trying to get them some more rest, because it's very difficult with having to get to school at 7:50 and sports and everything else to really get that proper rest.
Yeah, and since we're outing children, I'll share that my teenage daughter refers to her morning self as a possession by a demon, and so can't be held responsible for what she says at wake time. So I'm familiar with the dynamic.
But again, thank you very much.
Yeah, so I think what Andrea said was something I was thinking about, which was like many of the people on the committee, the students and the faculty talk about that, like initially we think Snake's going to be better until we learn more about block. But it struck me when one of the student members talked about that time when you're first in the class and you're transitioning and your head is still in the other class, that then your first class of the day and the last class of the day with the 80-minute block, when you first get to your first period class, you're going to have a little more time not to really feel like it's your first period class, and ditto with your last period class. And it will be like a faculty student learning of how that cadence goes on in those first and last classes. So that kind of answered it for me from listening to the faculty and the staff. And then in terms of what Brian was saying, I felt like one member of the committee said that the office hours are sort of built into the morning, and with the concern about, well, what happens if you miss, we're talking about 4x4 now, you miss day one, you're out sick. You can kind of adjust yourself in the morning by visiting those staff that you need to visit and kind of organizing yourself so that you can even better get back on the next day after. It just seems like I remember the first time we talked about schedule change and how up in arms our community was. And this is a totally different experience hearing about it. So I want to just thank you for all your work on this. But I have one specific question, which has to do with skinnies. So in the experience of high school students that have been in my family, there are these little things like health and economics, which end up being these like half-year courses. Do those end up fitting into skinnies?
So our economics class, right now, with many seniors, so there's two types of economics courses. There's some students who take economics as a half-year elective. This would continue, those courses would continue to operate generally as a half-year elective, 80 minutes every other day, which is the same number of instructional minutes as the 40 or every day over the course of the year. Courses like health or PE, or there may be other electives that make sense to turn them into skinnies based on teacher availability or based on the unique cluster of students who are requesting those. So I think the most natural places to start when thinking about skinnies are PE and those science extensions. We're currently meeting with departments. I met with the English department to talk about what this schedule might mean for English 9 writing. I have a meeting coming up with the health teachers to discuss what's the best permutation of health meeting. One of the schools we visited does a really unique thing where students get a quarter credit of health in their first year and then another quarter credit of health in their junior year.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so I mean, so this allows us to be more creative with our scheduling.
Well,
And
yeah, because Andrea and I have talked a little bit about how health class specifically, which kids will often like put off until senior year because of various reasons about getting in their other courses on the current schedule. By having it in 2 places, it's actually the
Right.
places that are most beneficial for the kids considering the experiences they're having.
And so I think it's fair to say that the schedule we build next year, if there are other opportunities ahead of us, it's flexible enough that we can continue to evolve without having to say, oops, we need another schedule change and another schedule change.
Yeah, and I
so-
had forgotten that economics also has that AP micro.
Yeah, but that was the
macro
other
piece.
path. That's right.
the thing.
Right.
But is there like so you mean if you don't do that, those are semester-long daily classes? There's some other form of economics that's like, just like,
So yes, there is. So the majority of our students take 2 AP courses, one each semester, and they're sort of mashed together so that students are able to get the benefit of 2 APs in one scheduling. There are other students who opt to take just 1 semester of economics that meets like any other semester elective. But
and
again,
some people take just 1 AP and then switch to
yes,
another.
correct.
Okay, all right, that's washed out
And-
the
and-
details, yeah.
And just as, I mean, to bring up the topic of later start time, when we're
Yeah.
ready to talk about that and look at that, I'm happy to engage in that conversation. I think if, given a white piece of paper saying design a schedule that works best for high school students, later works better. I think there are a number of, again, like permutations that have to be worked out and we have to look at ripple effects. So we want to be thoughtful about that, but I'm happy to engage in that conversation.
Yeah. Thank you for this thoughtful presentation, everyone.
Yeah, just a comment. I want to thank you for the thorough presentation, and as an elementary school teacher trained in the workshop model, this makes total sense to me.
I know when elementary school teachers heard us say, we want to go to 60 or 80 minutes. they're like, how revolutionary. We've only done it forever. Yes, yeah.
Hi, thank you for the great presentation, and I'll be quick because I think we're only 2.5 hours from Susan's birthday. So just one question. I love the block idea and I love how you presented it. I think it makes a lot of sense. It does mean that the classes are kind of precious because they only happen a few days a week. Did any of these school districts do any extra planning around substitute planning or when teachers are out because that class is like 2 classes out today?
So like everything else, there's sort of 2 sides to it, right? On the one hand, if you miss a day, oh my gosh, you missed that whole day and that class doesn't meet again, so you feel like you miss a lot. On the other hand, as students in the block schedule were quick to say, yeah, but if you miss a day, you only missed half the classes, not the other half, right? So that there's both pros and cons to it. There are, I'm sorry, I think I may have lost the.
Oh, yeah, no, just because it's an 80-minute for a substitute teacher. Is
Yeah,
there
so
any
we're,
extra
thank
planning
you.
that they do?
So that's one of the things that that we will determine. I know sort of the quick feedback I've gotten. The students, the juniors and seniors who this year have been living under the sort of asynchronous model are loving it, wants to continue it. They are responding well to the sort of, autonomy and independence, and I can get this work done in the time and space works best for me. And they are very positive. I have heard some concern from parents who have said, well, wait a minute. So if my student had, let's say, 2 teachers out, which happens, and had a free period that day anyway. Now all of a sudden they came in for unit lunch in one class period. Is that a meaningful school day? Which I think is a valid question. And as administrator, one of the administrators, both of those make sense to me. And there's a third one, which is I want to think about, and I want to be really thoughtful about what it would mean for the building to have large numbers of students. And again, our students are great. I don't have to worry about, I'm thankful. I don't have to worry about, oh my gosh, was there a fight in the hallway today and all those kinds of things. But that said, having large numbers of students without a supervision model, unit lunch, we're going to have a lot of hands on deck. Second academic block, if there's, the wrong constellation of teachers out, where all of a sudden a whole bunch of students are just free. That's something I want to be really thoughtful about. And so we have time the rest of this year to, I think, make the best decision.
Thanks.
Whenever I'm asked about this, I say I can't give like a full opinion because I'm not actually going to be affected by this at all. So I try my best to put myself in their shoes, and
You're still invested in Irvington, right?
I'm
We still
very
have you for a little
invested.
bit of time.
I just don't think I can like fully imagine myself. Like I can't imagine myself or my peers being in this situation. And that's something that I need to like figure out. But I would probably be like very, like for myself, it would be a lot of change for me and all of our seniors, because like we've gone through this for 4 years and this is exactly what we're used to. This is what we were used to in middle school. And I just think like it would just be too much for us to do, especially in our senior year. So that's like my opinion on that. But in theory, it sounds like amazing. That actual like academic side of it sounds really good. Something I did want to highlight though about the unit lunch, everyone's been raving about it, but something that I like about how our lunch is set up right now is that when people aren't automatically put with their friends, they're kind of forced into these social situations with new people. And I was able to make a lot of new friends through that because I had freeze with not the people who I would typically talk to, and then I became really close friends with them. So I think that that's definitely something that might like be affected by unit lunch. And then the other thing I just wanted to echo is like I think a really large part of where student burnout comes from, especially upperclassmen, is really sleep deprivation, and that moving the start time would probably be one of the most beneficial things to high school students.
Yeah, I think Sabrina, those are not surprisingly great points. The one thing I would say about, you're right about the randomness, the kismet that can happen when you're not just with your friends. I think at least some of that will happen within classes where you're actually working with students more meaningfully and not necessarily your friends, but in those groups. I think that's where sometimes friendships are formed over the work. And so maybe we'll be able to have some of the best of both worlds. But I think you raised some great points.
Yeah, I have a few things. Firstly, that about the friends during lunch, it might be, for some students, it might feel weirder also to have everyone at the same time, because then you kind of have to pick and choose which friends you want to be with. So it's just a little thing. One thing we didn't talk about that much was that during lunch, the juniors and seniors are allowed to leave the school. So in the schools that we did attend, I did notice that a lot of students did say that they leave for lunch to get something. What else? Also, I think there's going to be sort of a transition period next year and maybe in the few years that follow. I don't think it's going to be exactly what we want it to be straight away. The teachers are going to have to go through a sort of learning period, and it'll just progress and be different. Then I have a few questions. Firstly, I asked if the meal vending machines are supplied by Airmark.
So the machines are a company called Venducation, and they're specifically meant to work with your school account. So you'll be actually putting in your student number along with another number that only you would know, like a privacy number, like a PIN number. And that way, your account would be charged, because again, it's a reimbursable meal. We have to follow all of the national school lunch rules. You can only have one meal per day that's free and one breakfast that's free. And then you could probably still buy some a la carte from the machines.
Okay, and what's the company name again?
Venducation, VEND, education.
Itself that was sourced by Aramark?
Yeah, the food will be, in the machine will go.
Yeah, that's okay. That's what I was
Right, but
asking.
we will,
Oh, okay.
the machines will be focused on, sandwiches, salads, bagels with cheese sticks, the things that are the most popular. And we'll be taking a survey, of course, to figure out which items those will be.
Okay. And for the classroom facility plans, do we know that these structures or like different classrooms we are gonna do this and it's gonna be for all the classrooms, or what's that gonna look like?
So we're going to look to bring one classroom online this year and to learn from it when we build our budget. We're about to enter budgeting season. We'll put together a plan. I'm sure it'll be a multi-year plan to try to increase the number of classrooms that have that kind of collaborative furniture. I don't think it would, I think it's probably beyond us to say we're going to refit the entire school at once and operate under the tax cap.
Yeah. And then for this year, juniors and seniors, when our teacher's out, we don't have substitutes and we just get to do what we want, I guess. Is that gonna be true for next year if we have these 80-minute periods?
So that we're still going to determine that. I think you, as a student, you're happy with that plan. You're enjoying it.
Yeah.
I think that's by and large the feedback I've received. I think some of the adults have mixed, although appreciate what you're saying, but some concerns. But we have time between now and the start of next year to figure out the best way.
Okay, yeah, that's all.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jonah. So I know it's late, but I didn't want to be remiss in not thanking all of the members of the committee, the students, the teachers, the guidance counselors who made time to look into this and do all of this work to bring us such a fine report. I also, I'm sure they're not listening, but I want to thank all the neighboring districts in Westchester and Rockland for hosting us and letting us learn from them, and, being good partners in that way. And of course, Sarah and John for their tremendous leadership to bring us this far. Time is a precious commodity, and how we spend it says a lot about who we are and what we feel. And I was very thrilled to hear the word happy, because it's important to be happy. It's important for our students to feel that their lives are manageable and we care for them. And it's important for our teachers to feel that they are working productively, and in a way that honors their expertise and profession. So I'm thrilled that we're going to embark on this change, and you can count on a good amount of support from us. I would also mention that change is hard, and we're going to figure it all out. And I want to thank James Groven and the IFA for their collaboration in doing so. But I'm very excited about the future. I think you've done a very diligent job bringing us to this point, and now we can roll up our sleeves and start to focus more on the details of how this is actually going to look, with Jonah's sage advice that it's going to be an iterative process that we will continue to refine over the years. But I couldn't be more grateful, and thank you, John, for your leadership.
Thank you very much. Sounds like we have a lot of exciting potential changes coming our way, and maybe a lot of grace to extend to one another in the process. Yes. And thank you all for attending tonight. Moving on to our first community comment period. Do I see any community members that want to make a comment? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on to item 10 with some policy updates. Anyone from policy committee? You kind of touched on this with the committee updates, but I'll have.
Yeah, these are policies that the policy committee have gone through and determined that they're outdated and obsolete. They're either outdated or they're covered by law. So, and we've gone through each one individually. So.
Okay, do trustees have any questions about these policies? Do I have a motion to accept the rescinding of the listed policies? So moved. All in favor? Aye. Very well. Okay. Moving on to the consent agenda. Do any trustees have questions on the consent agenda? No. Do we have a motion to accept the consent agenda? All in favor?
Aye.
Dr. Ratasek, any comments?
Yes, just one final comment. I want to congratulate Pam Dubelier and Brittany Comstock. Brittany, I promise not all the meetings are this long. Pam has committed to being our new treasurer and Brittany to being our new clerk. These are longtime employees of the district, so we're pleased to have them step up in these roles. And thank you for doing so. We look forward to working with you.
Yes, welcome. Okay. I'm on to the second community comment period. And I don't see that there is anyone here. Our next public meeting will be here in the campus presentation room on Tuesday. There's no date listed here, but it's the 16th. Thank you very much. Do I have a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.